All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Crew Show with a little San Francisco Giant video. Four Giants who could be on the trade block before the trade deadline. We'll talk about these four guys coming up next. Interesting article I just read about this. And of course, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. Get some brisket chili. Go say hi to Damon and Mary. Tell them that Larry Krueger sent you. And we're also brought to you by Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. Check them out along the Monterey Peninsula. They're at 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove. Call Anthony Catania at 831-521-5264. All right, kind of an interesting article I read today by Jackson Roberts. Four Giants who must be on the trade block before the trade deadline. Trade deadline's coming up at the end of July, so we're about a month away from the trade deadline, and it's a weird season for the Giants because it's been disappointing. I mean, they're sub 500. They went 5-2 this week, but they're 41-44 in the year, and yet. Despite being 3 games under 500, they're also only 3 games behind the Cardinals for that third and final National League wildcard spot. So are they in it or are they not? And I think anytime you're potentially in it, and when I say in it, you're within a arm's reach of the playoffs, I think it's incumbent that you go for it. And I think the Giants should go for it. And so even though you could argue they should, you could make a very compelling argument they should sell off on Snell and Cobb and Ray and some of the arms that they have that maybe other teams would want and go get a bevy of prospects and kind of reload for kind of a younger prospect filled, 2025 and beyond. They're only 3 games out of the wild card and it's a major market. I don't know that you can just sell. If you sell, you may wind up with a lot of empty seats coming down the stretch. So interesting article, I should say, by Jackson Roberts here from Clutch Points, who says that Matt Chapman, Michael Conforto, and either Marco Luciano or Walker Martin all are players that must be on the trade block between now and the deadline. Now, let's talk about them one by one. First of all, let's talk about Matt Chapman. I don't think he's going anywhere. This is their hand-picked guy. He loves Melvin. Melvin loves him. They're smitten with Chapman. I don't think he's going anywhere. Now he got off to a really slow start, and now he's quietly got things going. He went 0 for 4 to drop his season OPS to 586. That was May 10th. Since then, he's slashing 276 average, 380 on base over a 43 game stretch. So he's starting to heat up. And when Chapman is swinging the bat, he's incredibly valuable because he's the greatest defensive third baseman I've ever seen. I mean, maybe there's an old timer out there that will tell me that Brooks Robinson was better than Matt Chapman, but Chapman's the best defensive third baseman I've ever seen. And I've seen Mike Schmidt, Matt Williams, Nolan Arenado, and others. Chapman is just a machine defensively. So when he's hitting, he's really a very, very good player. So, you look at Chapman, as I said, he's Melvin, Melvin's handpicked guy. They were together in Oakland. I don't think Farhan's in any rush to get rid of him. There's a lot of teams that could use him. I mean, he's a 2-time platinum winning Gold Glove third baseman. He's got a 115 OPS plus as well. So he's going to be a guy that I'm sure teams would love to have, but it's like, are they going to give the Giants something? And then who's going to play third? Do you believe in Casey Schmidt? Is he ready to play third? Can he hit in the big leagues? So even though I think it makes sense to consider trading Chapman, I would say there's no chance that they're going to move Chapman. Now, the second name on this list is interesting. Michael Conforto. He's a lefty hitting outfielder. He got off to an amazing start. I mean, seriously, he really got off to a good start and he looked good early, but then he cooled off. His 2024 WOB on base percentage average is 313, which is pretty mediocre, but his XW on base percentage average is much better at 335. He's got one of the league's biggest differentials between slugging and X slugging at 427 to 477. It's because of the ballpark that Conforto doesn't have better numbers. So he's a good player. He could platoon for a winning team. You get him to a place like Yankee Stadium with a short porch and right, and he could have a monster second half. He's played in New York, so he could handle playing in New York. He's got an $18 million salary. So, you trade him in the middle of the year. It's only about an $8-9 million financial burden that somebody has to take on, which is not exorbitant. So I think he's movable. I think it makes all the sense in the world to promote, guys like, Matos and Ramos, and let those guys not just promote them, but play them every day, and move off of guys like Slater and Yaz and Conforto. So if you can find a market for Conforto, I'm absolutely pulling the trigger. And then the two other names they list here are pretty interesting as well: Marco Luciano and Walker Martin. So now we're talking about prospects, and we're talking about shortstops. And the Giants have Nick Ahmed right now, and they can plug him in. Marco Luciano is an intriguing player. It wasn't that long ago he was the Giants' consensus number one prospect, but he has struggled since then. The bloom is off his rose. They brought him up. He struggled defensively. He probably isn't a shortstop. He might even not even be an infielder. And this is where the Giants farm system, gets criticized. They drafted this kid so high, and they believed in him, and they promoted him as through their system as he's the shortstop of the future. But the glove's not there, and it's pretty obvious. And he might not even have the glove to play third. So now this pretty good offensive player who was going to be a mercurial offensive player at shortstop is now either going to be a left fielder or a DH or maybe a third baseman, maybe a first baseman. And that bat doesn't play nearly the same at first, at third, at DH, and left and right as it does if he's a shortstop. So I don't think he's a shortstop long term. And the Giants, because of that, probably don't view him as indispensable. And they also have a 20-year-old infielder named Walker Martin. Major League Pipeline ranks Martin as the Giants' fifth best prospect. He's probably their best minor league position player that they could package right now that other teams would want. But he might be the shortstop of the future. And it might be one of those things where I'd move Luciano, but I would only move him if I could get a big-time player, a Luis Robert, an Andrew Vaughn, a Vladdy Guerrero. If you could get a middle-of-the-order producer and then turn shortstop long-term over to Walker Martin, I'd move Marco Luciano. I wouldn't be afraid there. Why? Just because I think Luciano, as I said, he's had some back problems, and also I think he's going to project as a left fielder or a DH. And I think that bat, between the swing and miss, the strikeouts, the back problem, the lack of defense at shortstop, the lack of defense maybe even in the infield, he suddenly becomes a left fielder or a DH who's got power but strikes out a lot and hits for a low average. Suddenly, the value of him as a prospect is totally evaporated from he's going to be a 5-tool shortstop to he's going to be a 1-tool left fielder, or he's a 1-tool or 2-tool DH. So, you know what? If they could get a big-time player back for Luciano, I would do it. And Conforto, that's a no-brainer. You're moving him all day, every day. And as far as Chapman goes, I personally have no problem trading Matt Chapman and turning third base over to Casey Schmidt or maybe even somebody else at some point. But I just don't think the Giants are going to do that. I just don't think they're going to move off of Chapman. I think there's too much of a love affair between Chapman and Melvin and Chapman and Farhan and Chapman and Far. I just don't believe they're going to move Chapman. But Conforto, definitely. Marco Luciano, definitely. And the right kind of a deal. I mean, I'm not moving Marco Luciano for a middle reliever. But if I could move Marco Luciano in a deal that got me somebody that could hit 3, 4, or 5 in a playoff caliber Giants lineup, I would absolutely do it. So, Giants fans, what do you think? What do you think of those names? Are those the guys? To me, when I think about the Giants and the trade deadline, you got to think, first of all, what players do other teams want? There's that. What teams, you could say, well, I want to move this guy, I want to move that guy. Okay, who do you have that other teams are going to want that you would actually be willing to move? I would be willing to move Camilo Doval, who's a 26-year-old closer, if you could get some good talent back, because I think Doval's price tag right now is really high. Um, either one of the Rogers brothers, I would definitely move. Any of your veteran starting pitchers from Snell to Ray to Cobb, I'd be interested in moving those guys, especially looking at some of the young arms they have coming up through the system. Lamont Wade's having a really good year. If a contender wanted him, I would listen. And then Slater, Yaz, Conforto, maybe even Jorge Soler, who's starting to heat up right now. But there you go. Though that's the article that's out that says the 4 Giants who they must consider trading ahead of the deadline, and they have Matt Chapman, Michael Conforto, Marco Luciano, and Walker Martin. I don't think you're moving Walker Martin, but Luciano and Conforto, I definitely could see being on the move. Chapman, I just don't see it. Tell me what you think, though. Give me your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring this video as well. Check them out. Check out the link in the description below. Use the promo code Krug, K-R-U-E-G, and they'll match you up to your first $100. And thanks to all of you guys for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube.